Welcome to the Fair's Love Podcast, Single, Not Stalled, Pursuing Sanctity in Your Singleness. This podcast is for Catholic women who find themselves living the single life, whether it's by choice, vocation, or circumstance. Here we believe that this time is not just a waiting period, but a season rich with purpose, growth, and grace. Join your hosts, Monica and Katie Hinderer, two sisters navigating the single life from different perspectives as we dive into conversations about faith, friendship, professional growth, and finding joy in the everyday. Let's embrace this extraordinary journey together. Monica, the weather here is so nice today. I don't know what it's like by you in Chicago, but St. Louis is primo.
Is that your joy for the week?
No, I think my joy, well, it's kind of related, but my joy is Sunday. I went for a hike with a friend, and it was just like a really nice day, but it was also just a nice hike with just the two of us. So that was probably my joy for the week.
Oh, that's so nice. I was going to say mine is weather related because yesterday was like incredible. Like it was like 70 degrees. I went for walks in between my clients, and I am back at CrossFit. And for the first time this season, they had the garage doors open. We had an outdoor run scheduled into the WOD, and I was like, yes. I mean, it killed me. I was like, I'm dying, but I had the privilege to be dying while running and moving my body. So, which is what my coach likes to remind me of, right? He's a very big, he's a very big, gratitude guy, and count your blessings, you're privileged to be here. Like, you're blessed to move your body, so let's move it. And I was like, when? It's like, okay, I mean, you're right. But it's actually a really good perspective of because people come in complaining about things like it's still so dark out, or it's like it's so cold, and he's like, cut it out. And I'm like, yeah.
This reminded me, I had a coworker once who, when I was teaching, we're sitting at the table, went to the teachers, and somebody commented and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these wrinkles that I'm getting. It's so frustrating. And this girl looks at this other teacher, this one teacher looks at the other teacher and goes, and what a privilege it is to be able to age enough to have wrinkles. Because her mom had died really young. And I was like, snap. That's a good reminder, right?
Yeah.
That's a privilege. Not everyone gets in that certain sense. Yeah. Crazy. How's your back? You had thrown your back out previously from.
It's good because I'm actually doing the little things to care for it, which I'm realizing more and more. I'm like, yeah, I need to be very intentional with how I'm taking care of myself in the little ways. So a lot of stretching and rolling it out and going for walks. And part of it is also attributed to the book that I'm reading in this book club for Lent that we talked about previously, of kind of these areas of rest, and that physical rest is kind of these restorative movements, and that your body's going to tell you if it's not getting it, and which mine totally has. And so I'm trying to incorporate some of these practices, which a little bit of it is also related to what we talked about last week, in that this concept of having it all, and thinking about, I'm trying to slow down and in that be a little more intentional with well, what am I doing and where am I going, instead of just feeling like I have to do everything and be all things. So that means I've been starting most of my days. The weather here is really hit or miss, but I have a deck. And so I go out on my deck and I breathe fresh air for 5 minutes. And it's a morning gratitude practice that I'm doing of what are the things I'm thankful for. It actually is really great to kind of clear my head and set the day of just doing what I can and being present with where I am. And then I found I'm more intentional with where I'm going in life.
I love that. That's so interesting. This morning I was making breakfast, and I was realizing I felt so scattered, making the breakfast and all over the place. And I was like, I think I'm just gonna put on some chill coffee house vibe instrumental.
Yeah.
And it really helped kind of shift that early morning crazy. So I was like, it's so funny how something really small, stepping outside and breathing in the fresh air, or kind of making a switch of Instagram scrolling to something else or whatever, can be kind of a big game changer.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've completely changed my morning routine, and that obviously my brain early wants dopamine, it wants something exciting, wake it up, and that the lowest hanging fruit would be scrolling on my social media. But what I have found is that my brain feels more settled and I feel more capable of accomplishing the things I need to accomplish in the day if I just complete a small, short task. So what I mean by that is like I unload my dishwasher in the morning and my brain is like, ooh, task done, hit a dopamine, but also a sense of accomplishment that
Mm-hmm.
helps you kind of keep momentum going. It's really hard for us to go from easy task to hard task. It's
Mm-hmm.
easier to go from like hard to medium or medium to hard where we're not making massive jumps. And so if I'm going to start my day scrolling, my brain's going to feel totally scattered. And then to jump into work that requires focus or maybe difficult concepts, I don't want to. There's not one part of me that wants to, and then I'm like dragging myself. And so yeah, I'm a big fan of finding a morning routine that like actually works for you.
I agree. Yeah, you gotta switch it up sometimes or try different things and see. I also think different seasons of life also make it, a difference. Even I was thinking like, okay, we just had daylight savings, so now it's darker later in the morning. But as it starts to get lighter early in the morning, like sometimes I change my morning routine based on the light levels and all of that as well, right? Like much more likely to eat breakfast outside on days that it's nicer than, I could in the winter, for instance, or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right. This week, your topic of preference, what are we talking about?
The masks we wear.
Hmm.
The masks we wear. This kind of it struck me that well in the book that I'm reading it was talking about sort of the fact that most of us are not emotionally rested, which if you didn't listen to that episode, I think it was 2 episodes ago, so go back and take a listen. It was called Rest, and we talked about kind of these 7 levels of rest, but one of them was emotional, which was basically one's ability to detach from kind of people pleasing behavior and live an authentic self. And she kind of posits that we are typically emotionally burnt out because we are inauthentic.
Mm.
And that we, so for me, for example, one of the masks I wear is therapist, and I don't get to have genuine emotional reactions to what my clients say. Right? I'm supposed to be kind of a blank slate, at times a mirror, I'll mirror you, but to react, like if someone says something terrible and I react horrified,
Sure. Yeah.
it's gonna hurt the therapeutic process because our inclination is then to like care for the other person or attune to them. They shouldn't be attuning to me. And so that means like for a significant percentage of my week, I'm actually being inauthentic to my emotional experiences and I'm putting my emotions and experiences on a shelf, and that can lead to burnout. And that this made me think of all of the other times and ways we mask and we're not always authentic, and maybe why that is and how we can work towards, to the best of our ability, unmasking and living a more authentic life.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think everyone has, like you, moments in which they must wear a mask. Right. So like for you, you must wear a mask in therapy to a certain extent, right? Like I'm thinking of myself like as the CEO, like I to a certain extent have to wear a mask if somebody comes up to me and says, I'm quitting or I'm really upset by this or I messed this up. And if I, like they mess up a project and if I have this big emotional reaction, which internally I might be having, right? Like that's going to do more damage probably than another mask. So I think it's also interesting to try and figure out like what are the moments in which we're wearing a mask because we have to, and then how do we deal with that? Like where do we allow that mask to slip off and to let those emotions come out versus when are we wearing a mask when we don't actually have to? Even if we feel like we have to, we don't actually have to. Like I think there's two different moments or experiences.
Yeah, I was talking to friends about this recently, and one of them, her therapist is challenging. She's like kind of exhausted with the whole dating process, and her therapist actually challenged her to date again to keep because she dated so much last year, like an insane like first dates or something, and you're like, my God, that's like almost a date a week, just like a lot. And but the therapist was like, it's exhausting because you're not being authentic.
Mm.
That and the challenge was go on a date and then when you come home from that date, journal about whether or not you were authentic. Like if he made a joke and you laughed, but you didn't actually think it was funny, why did you laugh? It wasn't
Mm.
funny. Thinking about why, and I think sometimes this is maybe the danger for people who are situationally single, is that maybe we wear masks because we have this like deep desire to be chosen or to be married one day. And so we want so badly for them to choose you.
Hmm.
Well, but eventually that relationship will fall apart because the authentic you at some point will come out and it will have been not a compatible match because you weren't fully yourself in the
Right.
beginning.
Right. Yeah, you matched with somebody who didn't actually know who you were.
Right. And so sometimes the challenge is to think one thing that can be helpful in navigating when you're wearing masks versus when you're being authentic is to think about, you may have a handful, maybe it's only one or two people in your life who you do feel like yourself around. You feel just yourself and honest and authentic. And sometimes the question is, well, what does she do? And if she were with this person, I asked this friend, I said, well, what would you do if I made a joke that wasn't funny? And she's like, I'd roll my eyes and be like, that was not funny. I'm like, then do that to the guy.
Right.
That wasn't funny. Like, or whatever, right? But sometimes we have to examine our life and ourselves so that in knowing ourselves better, we can be more authentic in like kind of the day to day when maybe authenticity feels scary or unacceptable.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's interesting too, because I think as women, like we are very attuned to the emotions of others, some more than others, obviously. But I think we are much more attuned. And so I think often we might have an inauthentic reaction, or we might have a mask on for what we see as the good or the needs of the other. So, non-romantic, someone you're getting to know says a joke, you don't think it's funny, but you're like, they think they're so funny, so I think I'm gonna laugh now, right? And we're like, we're like hyper aware of their emotional state or their needs, and putting ourselves like by the wayside. And it's this tricky balance of like, obviously, yes, we want to like love those around us, right, and give of ourselves to those around us, but we can do that by being ourselves best, not by being somebody that we're not, or appearing somewhat different.
Yeah, my therapist told me recently, and I was like, wow, okay, that self-sacrifice or service to another is not the same as self-abandonment, and to stop confusing the two. That to abandon myself for quote unquote the good of the other is not actually virtuous. And that how can we, yeah, like love and serve and be attuned to others while still being authentic? That the two they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And that actually it is not our responsibility to always, this is where the people pleasing comes in.
Right.
And she actually cited that women are conditioned to care more about this or to feel as though it's more of a feminine quality, and that men don't typically experience as much emotional burnout until they're married, when they are now situationally forced kind of into this emotional attunement with another person, and you feel kind of reliant or dependent on that. But the truth of the matter is, like, we are not actually responsible for anyone else's feelings to like fix, save, or change them. Like that we can be, loving and supportive, but not take on the burden as if it's our own.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so hard to remember though. And I think especially in our society today, I feel like our society is often telling us you are in charge of, or you are responsible for the emotional response of somebody else. Right? Those microaggressions that you're making, those whatevers, right? And like if someone's offended by something you said, like that's your fault. And I mean, I'm not talking like obviously big, horribly offensive things, but I think our society often tells us and pushes on us, like, you are responsible for this. You are responsible for the way the people around you feel. And that's even more complicated to navigate, as we already are kind of more prone towards this in general. You know?
Yeah, well, I think that if our measure of we are okay or we're doing it right is the emotional reaction of the other person, you are setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
That someone's reaction to me or to what I said or to what I did doesn't necessarily mean that I did anything wrong.
It's funny, I was thinking this is like unrelated but related. I was thinking this recently. Like I gave a talk to a group of women, and several came up to me afterwards like, that was an amazing talk, like thank you so much, like I learned a lot from it, da, 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 da. And then someone else was like, yeah, I got nothing out of that at all, like that was kind of a waste. But and at first I was like, oh my gosh, like I should have given a better talk. And then I was like, literally, like 5 women were like, that was great, thank you so much, da da da, whatever. One was like, that was not great, I got nothing out of it. And then somehow I was feeling responsible for the fact that this one got nothing out of my talk, when I'm like, well, that's between you and the Holy Spirit. I don't know what to tell you, lady. Like, whatever. But we feel responsible even when like it has nothing to do with us.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think we have to circle back to reminding ourselves, like in those moments, it's that deep breath and saying, well, what is in my control? Like, I'm in control of how I act and how I react, and that's about it. And if someone's got an issue with me, like, if someone has an issue with you and they're not close enough to you to confront you or repair, it's not a relationship you have to worry about.
Right.
I'm sorry, it's not. But we tend to think that it's our responsibility. And so part of that is also examining what am I, it's called over responsibility, which is like a cognitive error that we participate in. When am I doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And can I catch myself doing that? And that's why I actually think like a postmortem, like a journaling exercise after the fact to
Mm-hmm.
hold you accountable, to be reflective and to say, was I being myself in that situation or was I not? And why?
Yeah.
What were kind of the contributing factors to that? And is there a way for me to be more authentic?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, that decreases kind of your emotional distress, which is overall just really great. But then I thought about it too that if we're holding on to so many masks,
Mm-hmm.
in that our relationships with others and how we operate in the world has to be so performative, then we're probably encountering God that way too. Because it's very, very hard for people to compartmentalize. Human beings are not as good at that. If you've got an issue showing up in one area of your life, I could guarantee that certain threads of that issue are showing up in other areas of your life because it's within you. And we can't just be like, well, I'm only angry here, but I'm never angry anywhere else. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
likely untrue. So, what would it look like to show up authentically in prayer or in relationship with God? Or what am I participating in simply because I think I must, but it's not authentic to
Mm-hmm.
you or to your heart or to the language of your heart?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think could also add to kind of emotional burden or kind of the masks we wear of like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. Well, yikes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's so much. I mean, I think especially when we're thinking of relationship with God, right? Because each person has their own unique relationship with God. Like there's so many nuances and different ways it can look, but I feel like very often, especially I think especially as we're like in the early stages of like developing our relationship or like really kind of going deep, we often look to others who are explaining how to pray or how to do these things and we look at their example and then we think like I have to be that way, right?
Mm.
Or I think often we think it needs to like be some really high level dialogue of like deep, profound, whatever. And like in reality, like that's not what most people pray like, you know. But I think it's like, yeah, that we can often put on that mask and try and be like trying to show up even to God in a way that's like not really who we are because we think like that's what we're supposed to do and kind of have that like emotional, yeah, dryness or that emotional mask that we're kind of wearing.
Sure, I think it's, some people, maybe one of like a pretty simple example is like people who are unwilling to like be angry with God
Mm, sure.
because I don't feel as though like I'm supposed to, or
Right.
so what? So that relationship isn't authentic because like, do you feel angry? Do you feel like this is unfair? Do you feel confused? But you're not going to bring that to him. You're just going to be like, well, I praise the Lord in all things. Like, well, yeah, and
Yeah.
yes, Katie and I have been talking. Yeah, Katie and I
I'm
have been
also
talking a
wrestling
lot.
with this thing.
Yeah, about the really how so much of life is kind of lived with this like duality of it's both and that it doesn't have to be one or the other. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive. There
Right.
could be good things that happen and bad things that happen simultaneously. And as our brains hate that. We
Mm-hmm.
would love just clear, concise boxes. And so it because to be like emotionally authentic and honest is messy.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us are like less inclined to be messy, or we
Mm-hmm.
were raised to believe that meant a certain thing, or people said, well, you should or shouldn't do like this or that. Yeah, so I guess this is sort of a call to like be messy and be
Mm-hmm.
authentic. And as you're navigating those emotions and how to be authentic with them, it's like learning how to walk. You're gonna stumble a little bit, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It's all a part of a much larger process that I promise leads to better relationships.
Sure. Yeah, definitely deeper relationships when you can be vulnerable and take the mask off and really be who you are. It's funny, this conversation is making me think of a friendship I had for a really, really, really long time. And then this is the most, I'm about to tell you the most like millennial Gen Z story ever. Welcome to,
Amazing.
but during COVID, I posted something on my Instagram about how I just was really struck by how many people have started living in fear and how we're letting fear kind of determine our factors. And so people weren't ever leaving their houses anymore, and people were afraid to even walk around their block. And so that was what I was commenting on, right? That I think choosing to live according to fear is a really bad place to be in, right? And so that was all. That was the post, right? That was the whole post. I wasn't calling anyone out particularly. I wasn't even calling out particular groups of people necessarily, right, etc. And this friend of mine contacted me, well, texted me and said, "I'm super offended and really hurt by that post that you made. You need to take it down." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not gonna take it down. This is my opinion. I actually like really thought and prayed a lot about this post too. And I said something like, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that your feelings were hurt by the post. And she wrote back and she's like, that's not an apology, right? She's like, you're not apologizing for your actions. And I said, no, I'm not. And if you're looking for an apology for my actions, I'm sorry, you're not going to get it. I'm not sorry for the post. It wasn't calling you out. It wasn't calling anybody out. But I am sorry that you're really hurt by this. And she said, okay, message received. And she blocked me on everything and stopped following me. And we've never spoken since. And this conversation has been making me think of this in the sense of like, she was really emotionally triggered. I mean, I had been really authentic in this. I think she was also being really authentic to sort of reach out and be like, I am hurt by this post. But also the fact that then her hurt and I was gonna say inability, but that's not right. My unwillingness to take this post down because it wasn't the kind of thing to take down, right? Like caused her to be so emotionally shut down. And it was at the time I like thought about taking it down, and then I was like, to me that would be like putting on a mask. Like I really believe in this thing that I posted, right? And I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't, saying anything against a particular person or against her at all. I honestly didn't even have her in mind when I wrote the post. Right. And I was like, oh, this is so fascinating how that is. And how I think, to this that we're talking about today, like sometimes, yeah, we have to be aware of the masks that we wear. But I think also too, we have to, thinking of this like emotional health or this emotional rest, we have to also look at our emotions sometimes and realize like, me having this really strong emotional thing that I'm clinging to is not actually also helping me rest. Like I can acknowledge this, I can work through it, but then I need to move on from it as opposed to hunkering down in it, if that makes sense.
Are you saying like your friend was hunkering down or you were?
No, my friend. I mean, I was afterwards. I was so emotionally distraught afterwards. I like literally went to dinner and I was like shaking. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, and I think that's because our listeners like maybe know like Katie more than I is
Yeah.
like as a people pleaser, like in that like this.
I'm very conflict averse.
Yeah, very conflict averse and very overly concerned with helping monitor the emotions of others, and I am often like the opposite approach. And there's probably like the most beautiful part's probably somewhere in the middle. And so
Exactly.
yeah, because my knee-jerk reaction if someone had texted me that would have been very different. But it's not better, it's just different. And but thinking more so about the fact that actually like although painful, what a great exercise in you learning to detach from people-pleasing tendencies, which is actually freedom. It actually gives you freedom because like a chameleon, just because everyone's friends with you doesn't mean that they're good or deep friendships, and that actually being authentic, while it may hurt initially because people will reject you, the people who choose you are better friends for you. I'm not saying that they're better people. I'm saying that they're more compatible to who you are, to where you're going, and to what you need. And that we are often so afraid. Like I hear, I told a friend one time, was looking at her dating profile and I was like, I think that you should be more like authentic. Like I think you should be more honest on this thing, like about like this and this and this, and kind of calling her out for some things. And she said, but then I'll only have like 5 likes and there'll be nothing left. And I said, yes, but those 5 likes are the correct 5, right? They're the compatible 5. And so some of it, I think, in order to be authentic, you have to know why you're not being authentic. And you have to also kind of bolster yourself for the fallout of being authentic. People aren't going to like it. And are you prepared for that? Are you okay with that? That this is going to be it's a painful process. Rejection hurts always. So thinking about, why do I put masks on? What am I afraid of? Or what am I hoping for to gain in this, in this behavior that I'm participating in? If I chose to live an authentic life, would I lose friends? What would I lose? What would I fear? And just being really honest with yourself about why you're doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I think, yeah, there's so much to like just think through and kind of, I love the idea of journaling about it afterwards and kind of having that like debrief after anything, after a date, but after maybe a time out with coffee with a friend or someone you're trying to get to know, or maybe it's, dinner with a sibling or a parent, and you're like, okay, I gotta like write this out and kind of like debrief a little bit to see like where did masks go up? Because I think often we don't always wear the mask the whole time, right? We're very much ourselves, and then something happens or someone says something, and then suddenly the mask goes up, and then it might come down for a little bit in areas that maybe feel safer, and then it goes back up, right? And so I like the idea of kind of a debrief on occasion, taking it to your prayer or journaling or something to really kind of think it through and work it out that way.
I imagine that a woman who is vocationally single really runs the risk of taking on the mask of what she thinks her order or organization expects of her. So for example, like if you go in thinking like, this is who and how a Carmelite is, that I think could lead to a lot of vocational burnout, because while there is maybe like a charism that you're expected to live, and this is how we live said charism, the goal there is to live that charism in only the way you can live it. And that requires this really kind of beautiful and probably long journey of blending one's authentic self to one's vocation.
Yeah,
And
the charism they're called too. Yeah, I was thinking that. I think for vocationally single, I think there's like two aspects. One, this that you were saying is we can feel like we need to look like wear the mask of whatever we are. So for me, like a numerary or whatnot, and like whatever that is, Pines, who knows what that like is supposed to look like, but we have that idea, right? And so suddenly we wear that. But I also think too, and I'm sure this is true for religious orders as well, those who are constantly wearing a mask tend to discern out. Because you just can't wear a mask all the time and feel like you're kind of fighting the charism with who you are and all of that kind of stuff to live that like kind of seamless blended life. Now obviously we all wear masks at times, right? But I think if the majority of your vocation tends to feel like you're in a mask or you're trying to be that like ideal, I think that you end up discerning out. But the other way, and I think this might be more accurate for those who are like more long term is I think you can often like wear a mask, especially when you're like doing apostolate or giving spiritual direction or mentoring in some way, in that you want to, I think it can be very typical to feel like you need to look like the like prime example that they need to like hold themselves up to, or like you can't look like you are also flawed because you're trying to help them work through their flaws. And I think that too, but I was thinking about it actually this weekend. I think the more authentic, even relationships when it comes to spiritual direction, offering other people mentorship or spiritual direction or spiritual accompaniment, the more authentic is when you are also sharing some of your own struggles and some of your own weaknesses with that person who is coming and sharing theirs with you, asking for advice and asking for help. Because if it's so one-sided, just from my experience, what I've seen is people tend to be less authentic. Like they tend to be less honest, not even in a meaning, like they're not meaning to be inauthentic. They just are less that way because they just don't feel
and I think often we wear masks because to chameleon is like a survival tactic to be chosen, to be in communion, and this goes deep to our nature of being social creatures. And what the irony there is that what will actually bring us into deeper communion with each other is authenticity.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that because nobody is perfect. And I think, Katie, as you were speaking, I was like, oh yeah, I've run across people who, want to maybe ask some really big questions or layer on thick some I don't know, Catholic guilt or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, 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 I am not the spokesperson for the Catholic Church. Like, let me be abundantly clear
Yeah.
that sometimes we feel this immense pressure, weight, or burden. The problem is when it becomes a burden that we feel this immense burden to be a particular image that actually like Christ never asked us to do. And that if we were being honest, I actually wonder if we were being honest about the Catholic faith and its members, if more people would be inclined to join. I think that there's this stereotype of like these hoity-toity, holier than thou, like goody two shoes, and it's like, listen, we are all a big mess. We're idiots, and we keep failing. Like this funny reel popped up of a priest who was like, yeah, I encountered this guy who's an alcoholic, and I said, hey, how about you? I don't know, how about you become Catholic? And he's like, would you have me? He's like, would we have you? We'd love to have you. He's like, I'm an alcoholic. He's like, yeah. And we've got alcoholics and we've got drug dealers and we've got adulterers. Like, we've got them all. And he's like, really? He's like, come on in. And as soon as we help you with that one, we'll focus on the next one. Whatever is the next issue you've got going on. And we're just going to, and that actually, the goal of it all is not to be perfect, but to move the needle.
Right.
Let's move the needle. Let's get a little closer. Let's navigate that. And, how much more of a home would it feel like if people were actually honest about their struggles, about just the reality of life and of living and of being human.
It's funny. It's making me like there's something about shared suffering that like bonds. So, Monica and I, we've talked about this. We did the Camino last year and like 6 of us did it together. And I feel very bonded to those 6 people. Now, I knew all of them before. Monica didn't. But I feel like there was a bond. Or Monica is making me think too of like when we went skydiving.
Yeah.
And like they actually tell you that you're going to feel very bonded to the person you were attached to as you jumped out of a plane.
Yeah, you like trauma bonded with them.
It's true. You're like, yeah, because we shared a really vulnerable moment in which I jumped out of a plane. And I think the same in our lives, right? Like when we are vulnerable and we kind of let that mask slip and we're able to share with others, there's a bond that happens that can't happen when we are wearing that mask, right? And not letting them really see who we are.
Yeah, and I think it's just reminding me of there's this like he's a very woo-woo holistic trauma specialist, but I actually love what he says, and that the most significant part about trauma is that it isolates us. And that actually one of the most important tenets of healing trauma is that it witnessed and accompanied. And that in one's like to accompany one in their suffering makes it more tolerable to witness someone in their in their humanity and their traumatic experiences, makes it feel less isolating, even less like kind of consuming of like, wait a minute, like I'm not the only one.
Sure.
Which I think is, we're not going to be able to do that if we kind of wear this mask of like everything's fine all the time. Well, it's not. And it's okay that it's not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also important like knowing who to share what with. Like it's not that we're saying like tear the mask down and then tell everybody that you know that you had a migraine yesterday all day, and like that's not, but I think it's true, like we need to pull those masks down in our various relationships and connect on that deeper level.
Sure. And off the same thread, like you may not have to be transparent with everybody. So there's a difference. You may not have to be transparent with everybody. Not everybody has earned the story of your heart. It is something that is earned, yes. However, can we not be dishonest? And I think about this all the time when people are like, how are you? And we're like, I'm good. BS. No, you're not. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Or it's fine. Or something bad happens and everyone's like, it's okay. No, it's not. That was messed up. That's not okay. So maybe we can't go into all of it, but how are we actually honoring our experience in the language we use so that the language is truthful? It doesn't have to be transparent, but can it be at least truthful?
Yeah, it's true.
So when someone says, how are you? Yeah, go on.
It was making me think of somebody who I was talking to, and they had something like really traumatic happen, and I was like, "How are you doing?" And she's like, "It's okay. It's gonna be okay." And I said, it's not okay, but you will be fine. But it's not okay. It's really not okay what happened to you. But you're gonna get through this. And again, the two don't negate each other. It can be true. It can be true that this is really horrible and traumatic, and this was really bad, and that you're a survivor and you're gonna get through this. They're not mutually exclusive, you know?
I will say my clients who are working with chronic pain or autoimmune are often the clients that I have to pull teeth.
Sure.
I have to just pull it out of them, where it's just like they cannot let the mask drop around other
You know
people.
what? Yeah. That's interesting because it's making me think of like my chronic migraines that I had. They're a lot less now, but I used to have them horribly. That mask, I'm not saying it's right, but I understand it because it gets so frustrating to just constantly be telling people when they're like, "How are you?" to be like, "I'm in a lot of pain today." And I think what is equally frustrating with that is I'm in a lot of pain today, and then people go and start offering all their dumbass suggestions for how you can get better. Well, just go for a walk. Well, did you take an Advil? Yeah, I took 6 already today and it's done nothing. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And so
Yeah. So,
I get. And so again, it's like I
well,
understand that mask, but it's a
yes.
figuring out how
But I think
to answer
so.
that.
Yeah, I think more of what I meant was that they chronically live in a mask, which is why they're not feeling well. And now they've developed another mask to mask their mask. Because, yeah, it is, especially with chronic illness where I can't see it. You'd
Yeah.
have to communicate with someone that you look okay on the surface, but you're not feeling okay. And then here comes questions. So it's easier to just be like, I'm fine, to not engage in the conversation. And I do. But the mask that led you to that place of like maybe not feeling free to have emotional expression, to express, actually, these people, what I find is that they are the least likely to express anger.
Hmm. So they
They
bottle
just
all that up.
they bottle it up because my anger is going to make someone upset, or it's going to make this situation uncomfortable, or someone's going to have an issue with it. And the people who won't show quote unquote negative emotions, just because you're not expressing it outwardly doesn't mean it's not being expressed internally.
Yeah.
And I have to somehow I have this image of I'm perfect or I'm kind or I'm happy, and the happy person isn't allowed to be upset. The happy person
Yeah.
isn't allowed to be angry. Well, what I say to that is bonkers. No. Bunk. Let it rip. And you'll find a way eventually to be authentic in that expression. In the beginning it might be messy, but good. Who cares? Everyone's
Yeah.
fine. We're
Well,
all
and I
fine.
think too, like so I can imagine some people listening to this and being like, okay, but like anger. Okay, but like yeah, look at our Lord. He flipped tables. He flipped tables. He wasn't like, you guys, this isn't really good. Like he was like, hell no. Like we're not doing this in my father's house, right? Or even Peter, who's like, no, Lord, you don't have to die. And he's like, get behind me, Satan. Like he's not like
Said
keeping
it.
it chill. Like, like there are moments that all of our emotions have valid place and time. Now, what we do with them and how much we feed into them is a different story, but none of our emotions are invalid, right? Or don't have yeah, or can't be space held for them. That's not the right wording, but you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, I think that if we ignore them or suppress them, we're not creating space for them to sit, to listen. Here's actually, when people say feelings aren't valid, what I often think that that person mean is like that person is being reactive to their feelings, not listening to
Mm-hmm.
their feelings. And then, yeah, we don't get to do whatever we want. But if we actually took the time to address and acknowledge and create space for what we were feeling, it would lead us to a deeper truth of our heart, which
Mm-hmm.
then would give us a better path forward.
Yeah. I was even, yeah, thinking that this week with this AI experiment I'm doing with fitness and health and whatever. And like, yesterday I was feeling like so depleted and like so lazy. And at first I was like, no, I'm just gonna like power through. And then I was like, no, like I need to take a step back and be like, why am I feeling this way? Right. And I was like, I've been like running at full speed ahead. My whole weekend was full. I traveled to Kansas City and back in one day, like crazy. I'm like, well, No duh, right? But if I would have just ignored it, I probably would have been down with a migraine today. But I was like, no, I'm going to acknowledge this. I'm going to think it through. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to rest today. And tomorrow I'll be able to go full steam ahead.
Yeah. And your body and your emotions are communicating something to you. Now, if you think that that's weakness, that's a you problem. The emotion's not weak. You think it's weak from whatever came up in your childhood that told you that. Or if you think, and this is the conditioning of women, right, that our society has said women should be meek and mild, right? And they don't make waves. BS. There's no biblical reference to that. That like sometimes waves need to be made. Sometimes truth needs to be spoken. And sometimes speaking truth or being honest or listening to our body or listening to our heart means it's going to put someone else out, or it means that it's going to make life a little bit harder. But that's okay.
Yeah. What a week. Love it.
What a week. On that note, that's it for this week on Single Not Stalled. We hope this episode gave you new insights and a renewed sense of purpose in your daily life. Wherever you are on your journey, remember that God is with you, and this season is filled with opportunities to grow, flourish, and make an impact. If you're loving this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it. It helps more women like you find this community. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Join us on social media at Single Not Stalled. We'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. Until next time, keep living fully and walking boldly.